A single gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Montana Territory in 1876, startling Garrett Campbell from her hiding spot beneath the abandoned stagecoach station's porch. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her breath shallow, her heart pounding against her bruised ribs as footsteps approached. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the weathered boards above her, and Garrett prayed to a god she wasn't sure was listening anymore that whoever was coming wouldn't find her. Samuel Shepard had been tracking the stagecoach robbers for 3 days, following a trail that had gone cold at this abandoned way station. As he dismounted his dappled gray stallion, he noticed fresh scuff marks in the dirt leading under the station's porch. Drawing his Colt revolver, he approached cautiously, years of bounty hunting having taught him that cornered outlaws were the most dangerous kind. But what he found wasn't an outlaw at all. In the deepening shadows beneath the porch, he saw a woman with tangled auburn hair and wide, terrified eyes. Her dress was torn and dirty, her face streaked with dust and what appeared to be dried blood. She was curled into herself, silent as death, watching him with the wariness of a wounded animal. Samuel holstered his gun slowly. "Madam," he said softly, "I ain't here to hurt you." Garrett didn't respond. She couldn't. Fear had stolen her voice days ago, when the stagecoach she'd been traveling in was attacked. She'd escaped by playing dead, then running when the bandits had moved on with their loot. For 3 days, she'd been hiding, moving only at night, avoiding any sign of human life. Her throat was parched, her stomach hollow with hunger. Samuel squatted down, keeping a respectful distance. "My name's Samuel Shepard. I'm tracking the men who've been robbing stagecoaches in these parts." He studied her face, noting the fading bruise on her cheek. "I reckon you might have had a run-in with them yourself." Garrett's eyes darted to his badge, then back to his face. A bounty hunter. Not law exactly, but not an outlaw either. Still, she couldn't bring herself to crawl out. "Listen," Samuel continued, sun setting, "and these parts ain't safe after dark. I'm going to make a fire, see if I can rustle up some food. You can join me when you're ready." True to his word, Samuel moved away, tethering his horse and gathering wood for a fire. He didn't look back at the porch, giving her space, but he positioned himself where she could see him clearly. As darkness fell, he lit the fire, the warm glow casting dancing shadows across the weathered boards of the station. The smell of coffee and beans cooking eventually reached Garrett. Her stomach growled painfully. She watched Samuel for over an hour as he sat by the fire, occasionally adding wood or stirring his small pot of beans. He didn't pressure her, didn't look toward her hiding place, just waited patiently. Finally, driven by hunger and cold, Garrett crawled out from beneath the porch. She stood on shaky legs, her dress caked with dirt, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Samuel glanced up but made no sudden movements. "There's coffee if you want it," he said, gesturing to a tin cup beside him. "And beans. Not much of a feast, but it's hot." Garrett approached cautiously, lowering herself to sit on a log opposite him, the fire between them. She reached for the coffee with trembling hands, the warmth of the cup a blessed relief against her cold fingers. "Can you tell me your name?" Samuel asked after she'd taken a few sips. Garrett opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Frustration flashed across her face. "It's all right," Samuel said quickly. "No need to speak if you can't or don't want to." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small notebook and pencil, offering them to her. Garrett hesitated, then took them, writing in a shaky hand, "Garrett Campbell." "Miss Campbell," Samuel said with a nod. "Pleased to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Garrett wrote again, "Stagecoach robbery. 3 days ago. Everyone else dead." Samuel's expression darkened. "I'm mighty sorry to hear that. Those same men have hit 3 coaches in the past month." He paused. "You're safe now. I'll see you to the nearest town tomorrow." Garrett shook her head vehemently, writing, "They'll find me." Who will? The leader, tall man, scar across his neck, said no witnesses. Samuel's jaw tightened. Sounds like Wade Byrne. I've been on his trail for weeks. He studied her face. You saw him clear enough to identify him? Garrett nodded, her eyes haunted. That makes you valuable, Miss Campbell. And in danger. Samuel considered for a moment. Change of plans. I'm taking you to my cabin. It's remote, up in the foothills. You'll be safe there while I track down Burton and his gang. Garrett hesitated, then wrote, Why help me? Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Because it's the right thing to do, he finally said. And because I've seen too many good folks hurt by men like Burton. That night, Garrett slept fitfully by the fire, while Samuel kept watch. At dawn, they set out, Garrett riding behind Samuel on his stallion. She held onto his waist, her body tense, but as the miles passed with nothing but the sound of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a hawk overhead, she gradually relaxed. Samuel's cabin was indeed remote, nestled in a small clearing among pine trees, with a stream running nearby. It was simple but solid, with a stone fireplace and sturdy furniture Samuel had built himself. It ain't much, he said as he helped her down from the horse, but it's safe. No one comes up this way except the occasional trapper. Inside, Samuel gave Garrett his bed and took the floor near the fireplace. For 3 days, they fell into a cautious routine. Samuel hunted, cooked, and cared for his horse. Garrett, still unable to speak, helped with chores around the cabin. They communicated through notes and gestures, an odd but functional silence settling between them. On the 4th day, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Garrett wrote in the notebook, I was a schoolteacher in Boston. Samuel looked surprised. What brought you out west? My brother. Gold rush. Letters stopped coming. Went to find him. Did you? Find him, I mean. Garrett shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I'm sorry, Samuel said softly. Losing family is hard. Garrett wrote, What about your family? Samuel's face grew distant. Lost my parents to cholera when I was 16.
No siblings.
Been on my own since then. He smiled faintly. Though I do have an aunt in St. Louis who writes me letters full of advice I never follow. Garrett smiled for the first time since he'd found her, and Samuel felt something shift in his chest. As days turned into weeks, Garrett began to heal. The bruises faded, and her strength returned. She still couldn't speak, but the terror that had haunted her eyes gradually dimmed. She took to exploring the area around the cabin, gathering wildflowers and herbs, leaving small bunches on the table that brightened the rustic space. Samuel, meanwhile, rode into the nearest town every few days, seeking news of Burton's gang. They had gone quiet, which worried him more than reports of robberies would have. It meant they were planning something, or possibly lying low after the bloody stagecoach robbery that had left Garrett the sole survivor. One evening, as summer was giving way to fall, Samuel returned from town with supplies and a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. Got something for you, he said, handing it to Garrett. She unwrapped it to find a leather-bound journal with blank pages and a set of graphite pencils. Her eyes widened in surprise. Figured you might like something nicer than my old notebook, Samuel said, suddenly self-conscious. And I saw how you was looking at those wildflowers like you wanted to draw them. Garrett clutched the journal to her chest, her eyes bright with gratitude. That night, she began sketching first the wildflowers she gathered, then the view from the cabin porch, and finally, while he slept, Samuel's face in repose. As autumn painted the mountains in fiery hues, their relationship deepened. They developed a language of their own, nods, gestures, written notes, and most of all, a growing understanding that needed no words. Samuel found himself looking forward to returning to the cabin each day, to the way Garrett's face lit up when she saw him, to the comfortable silence they shared over meals. One crisp October morning, Samuel was chopping wood when he heard a sound that made him freeze. It was soft, tentative, almost lost in the mountain breeze, but unmistakable. Garrett had hummed. He turned to find her standing at the edge of the clearing, a basket of pine nuts in her hands, looking as surprised as he was. "Was that you?" he asked. Garrett nodded, her hand going to her throat. She tried again, a single note, slightly stronger this time. Samuel set down his axe and walked toward her slowly, as if afraid a sudden movement might break the spell. "Your voice is coming back," he said softly. Garrett nodded, tears springing to her eyes. She opened her mouth, trying to form words, but only a raspy sound emerged. Frustration crossed her face. "It's all right," Samuel reassured her. "It'll come in time. The fact that you can make any sound at all is a miracle." That night, as they sat by the fire, Garrett worked for hours trying to produce sounds, sometimes humming, sometimes attempting words. Her first success was Samuel's name, raspy and barely audible, but clear enough to make Samuel's heart skip a beat. "That's it," he encouraged her. "Keep trying." By the end of the week, she could speak in broken whispers, though it clearly pained her throat to do so. Her first full sentence, whispered as Samuel handed her a cup of coffee, was, "Thank you for saving me." Samuel shook his head. "You saved yourself, Garrett. I just helped a little along the way." As Garrett's voice strengthened, Samuel learned more about her life. She had been 24 when she left Boston to find her brother, traveling alone after her fiancé had broken their engagement, unwilling to leave his comfortable life in the East. She had tracked her brother to a mining camp in Montana Territory, only to discover he had died of fever months before. On her journey back east, the stagecoach had been attacked. "I'm sorry about your brother," Samuel said one evening as they sat by the fire. "And about what happened on that stage." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice still raspy but growing stronger each day. "I don't want to go back east." Samuel looked up, surprised.
"No?
"What do you want to do?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "But there's nothing for me in Boston. No family. No home."
She paused.
"I feel more alive here, despite everything that happened." Samuel nodded, understanding. The West had a way of stripping people down to their essence, revealing who they truly were beneath the veneer of civilization. Some couldn't bear it and fled back east. Others, like him, found a freedom in it they couldn't find anywhere else. As the first snow dusted the mountains, their routine shifted. They spent more time indoors, Samuel teaching Garrett how to play poker with a worn deck of cards, Garrett reading aloud from the few books Samuel owned to strengthen her voice. In the evenings, they sat closer to the fire, and occasionally, Samuel would catch Garrett watching him with an expression that made his heart race. But always, in the back of his mind, was the knowledge that Wade Burton was still out there. Each time Samuel went to town, he gathered information, building a picture of the gang's movements. They had resurfaced, robbing a bank in a town 40 miles away, killing 2 people in the process. One night, as a blizzard howled outside, Samuel finally voiced what had been troubling him. "Burton's gang is moving again. Getting bolder." He stared into the fire. "As long as he's free, you're in danger." Garrett set down her mending. "You're going after him, aren't you?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Come spring, I'll have to. He needs to be brought to justice, and—" He hesitated. "And I need to know you're safe." "Take me with you," Garrett said. Samuel looked up sharply.
"What? No."
"It's too dangerous. I can identify him. I'm the only witness who can testify to the stagecoach murders." "That's exactly why you need to stay hidden," Samuel argued. "Burton would kill you in a heartbeat if he knew you were alive." "And how long do I hide?" Garrett's voice grew stronger with emotion.
"A year?
5 years? The rest of my life?" "That's not living, Samuel." The argument ended in a stalemate, but it sparked a tension between them that lingered through the long winter months. Garrett grew more determined, practicing with Samuel's rifle when he was out hunting, insisting he teach her to defend herself. "If I'm going to live in the West," she told him one day after hitting the center of a target he'd set up, "I need to know how to survive it." Samuel couldn't argue with her logic, though the thought of Garrett in danger made his blood run cold. As winter gave way to spring, their relationship shifted again. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the newly green valley below, Garrett suddenly took Samuel's hand in hers. He looked at her, surprised by the gesture. "You've never asked why I couldn't speak," she said softly. Samuel shook his head. "Figured you'd tell me when you were ready. Or not at all. It's your story to tell." Garrett squeezed his hand. It wasn't just fear, though that was part of it. "When the robbers attacked the coach, I watched them kill the other passengers one by one. The man sitting next to me was a father traveling to see his new baby. He showed me the picture before we were attacked." Her voice trembled. "I watched him die, begging for his life, and I couldn't make a sound. It was like my voice was frozen in my throat." Samuel's hand tightened around hers. "That kind of shock can do strange things to a person. After that, I ran.
Hid.
And still, I couldn't speak. It was like my voice had died with those people." She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Until you found me. Until I felt safe again." Samuel swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the trust she was placing in him. "Garrett, but before he could finish, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a kiss that started hesitant but quickly deepened with months of unspoken longing. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for a long time," he admitted. Garrett smiled. "So have I." That night, as the mountain air turned cold, they shared the bed for the first time, not as strangers thrust together by circumstance, but as two people who had found in each other something worth fighting for. The next morning, as they lay tangled together, Samuel made a decision. "I won't go after Burton alone," he said. "We'll go to the territorial marshal together. Tell him what happened. Let the law handle it." Garrett propped herself up on one elbow. "You mean that?"
Ida.
"This isn't just about bringing Burton to justice anymore. It's about our future."
He paused.
"If you want that." "A future. With me." Garrett's answer was another kiss, deeper and more certain than the first. 2 weeks later, they rode into Helena, the territorial capital. The town was bustling with miners, cowboys, and settlers, the streets muddy from spring rains. They went directly to the marshal's office, where Garrett gave her testimony about the stagecoach robbery, describing Burton and his men in detail. Marshal Thomas Jennings, a grizzled veteran of the frontier, listened intently, taking notes. "This matches reports we've had from other witnesses," he said when Garrett finished. "Burton's gang has been causing havoc across 3 territories. We've got a posse forming to go after them." "I want to join it," Samuel said. The marshal studied him. "You're a bounty hunter, Shepard. You work alone." "Not this time," Samuel said firmly. "Burton needs to be stopped, and I aim to help stop him." The marshal nodded slowly. "Posse rides out tomorrow at dawn. Be ready." Garrett clutched Samuel's arm as they left the marshal's office. "I'm coming too." "Garrett, no. It's too dangerous." "I'm not asking permission, Samuel. I've come this far. I need to see it through." Her eyes were determined. "Besides, you promised we'd do this together." Samuel knew that look by now. There would be no changing her mind. "You stay back when we find them," he insisted. "Promise me that." Garrett nodded, though Samuel wasn't entirely convinced. The posse set out the next morning, 12 men and Garrett, riding toward the Black River Valley, where Burton's gang had last been seen. Samuel kept Garrett close, both protective and comforted by her presence. They traveled for 3 days, following rumors and sightings until they reached a small settlement nestled in the valley. The town of Black River was barely more than a collection of rough buildings: a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and a handful of cabins. But as the posse rode in, Samuel immediately sensed something was wrong. The streets were deserted, doors swinging open in the breeze. "Ambush," he muttered, reaching for his rifle. Gunfire erupted from the buildings around them. 2 posse members fell immediately. Samuel grabbed Garrett and pulled her from her horse, taking cover behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around them. "Burton knew we were coming," Samuel growled, returning fire toward a window where he'd seen a muzzle flash. The marshal organized the remaining men, directing fire toward the buildings where Burton's gang was holed up. The gunfight stretched on, neither side gaining an advantage, until Samuel noticed a movement at the back of the saloon: men preparing horses, clearly planning to escape. "They're running," he shouted to the marshal, then turned to Garrett. "Stay here. Do not move." Before she could protest, he was gone, moving in a crouch toward the side of the general store, intending to circle around and cut off the escape route. Garrett watched him go, her heart in her throat, then noticed a man with a rifle on the roof of the blacksmith shop, taking aim at Samuel's back. Without thinking, Garrett raised her own rifle and fired. The man on the roof jerked and fell, his shot going wild. Samuel turned at the sound of her shot, their eyes meeting across the dusty street. He nodded once in grim thanks, then continued his advance. The gunfight intensified as the gang realized their escape route was being threatened. Garrett reloaded and fired again, her teacher's precision finding its mark as she picked off another of Burton's men who was trying to flank the posse. Suddenly, a tall man with a scar across his neck burst from the saloon doors, firing wildly. Garrett froze, instantly recognizing Wade Burton, the man who had ordered the execution of everyone on the stagecoach, the face that had haunted her nightmares for months. Burton's eyes locked on her, widening in recognition and rage. "You!" he shouted, raising his gun. Samuel appeared from the side of the saloon, tackling Burton to the ground. The 2 men struggled in the dirt, Burton's gun skittering away. Samuel landed a solid punch, but Burton was strong and desperate, kneeing Samuel in the stomach and reaching for a knife at his belt. Garrett watched in horror as the blade glinted in the sunlight, descending toward Samuel's chest. Without hesitation, she raised her rifle and fired. Burton's body jerked as the bullet found its mark, his knife dropping from suddenly lifeless fingers. Samuel pushed the body off him, looking up at Garrett with a mixture of shock and gratitude. The gunfire had stopped, the remaining gang members surrendering as they realized their leader was dead. In the aftermath, as the marshal's men rounded up the surviving outlaws, Samuel approached Garrett, who was standing frozen, her rifle still in her hands. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Garrett nodded, though her face was pale. "I killed him." "You saved my life," Samuel corrected, taking the rifle from her trembling hands. "And you got justice for those people on the stagecoach." Garrett leaned into him, the adrenaline of the gunfight finally giving way to exhaustion. "I want to go home," she whispered. Samuel wrapped an arm around her. "Back to the cabin?" She looked up at him, her eyes clearing. "Wherever you are is home now." 3 days later, they stood on the porch of Samuel's cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The marshal had been true to his word. The reward for Burton's gang had been substantial, enough for them to buy supplies, make improvements to the cabin, and still have money left over. "I was thinking," Samuel said, his arm around Garrett's waist, "we could build a proper house here. Something bigger. Maybe even start a small ranch." Garrett smiled. "I'd like that." She paused. "I was thinking too. The settlement at the foot of the mountain needs a teacher. The store owner told me when we were buying supplies." Samuel looked down at her. "You want to teach again?"
"Ida."
"I miss it." She turned to face him. "But I want something else first." "What's that?" I want to be your wife. Samuel's face broke into a grin. I was working up the courage to ask you. I've never been a patient woman, Garrett laughed. Besides, we've wasted enough time already, don't you think? Samuel's answer was to pull her close, kissing her deeply as the last rays of sunlight gilded the mountains around them. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I never thought I'd find someone like you. Especially not hiding under a porch, Garrett teased. Samuel chuckled. Especially not there. His expression grew serious. I love you, Garrett Campbell. And I love you, Samuel Shepard. She took his hand, leading him into the cabin that had become their sanctuary. Now let's go home. They were married that autumn in a small church at the foot of the mountain, with Marshall Jennings standing as Samuel's best man and the local storekeeper's wife standing up for Garrett. The settlement turned out in force to celebrate the union of the bounty hunter and the new schoolteacher, feasting and dancing long into the night. By the following spring, the cabin had been expanded into a proper house, and a small herd of cattle grazed on the meadow below. Garrett taught at the settlement school during the week, while Samuel, having hung up his bounty hunter's badge, worked their growing ranch and occasionally helped the marshal when trouble came to the territory. In the summer of 1878, their first child was born, a daughter with her father's steady gaze and her mother's auburn hair. They named her Hope, for what they had found in each other when hope had seemed a distant dream. On warm evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sunset with Hope sleeping peacefully in Garrett's arms, and remember that first meeting the silent woman in the shadows, the patient man who sat waiting until she reached for his hand, and the love that had grown from that moment of trust in a dangerous world. Do you ever regret it? Samuel asked once. Coming west? All the danger and hardship. Garrett looked at the valley below, at the life they had built together, and shook her head. Not for a moment. This is where I found my voice again. She squeezed his hand. This is where I found you. And as darkness fell over the Montana mountains, they went inside together, closing the door on the wild frontier beyond, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else together.